country never addresses themselves to the issue of speed up, the issue of safety, and certainly the issue of racism. And we had hoped to be able to confront the racists here at the convention, but apparently they've fled.
Good afternoon, or actually good evening, I guess. We want to start the activity. My name is Gregory Hicks. I'm going to be acting as the person who has the responsibility to kind of keep us on time. We are extremely grateful for everyone who are here tonight, and we also want to be respectful of your time. So if I interrupt or push people in the interest of moving the program and so forth, please excuse me in that regard. But I'm sure it'll be, when it's all said and done, in the interest of everyone. Also want to say something about the committee. And given that we're going to end the evening in a kind of sing-along, we probably will not have an opportunity at the end of the program to ask for the members of the committee to stand and so forth. So what I'd like to do up front, if you are on the committee and you're listed in the book, can you please stand and let everyone see some of the individuals who helped put this together? And please don't be bashful. We had a number of cooperating partners here at Wayne State University who helped us in this regard. Obviously, the Department of Africana Studies here at Wayne, and where I'm sure, I'm not familiar with the current chair, but I know everyone in the room knows the past chair, and that's Melba Boyd right here. Also, I think Merritt was with the labor studies section, I think, here in at Wayne, also provided some great assistance. And on that point, when you came in, provided you had gone to the correct parking structure, you should have a piece of paper like this. It's a piece of paper. This is your voucher, so that when you leave for the evening, that you don't have to actually kind of collect money amongst yourselves in order to bail your cars out of the parking lot. This voucher will help you get out of the parking lot. This is useful for, I believe, it's structure 1, and we hope that everyone had an opportunity and saw some of the signs that were posted around the campus to direct you to the proper parking structure. So with that, let me just say a little bit about pulling together this program. What we found out, and well, we didn't find this out, we knew this well in advance of putting together the program, that Mike actually interacted and intersect with any number of people over a long period of time. And there were a tremendous amount of people, both locally and nationally, who, if given the opportunity, wanted to be a part of the program. We had a decision earlier on, and that is, rightfully, if we would have asked everyone who had an opportunity for Mike to be a part of your life, and that everyone had an opportunity to speak in that regard, we would likely be here a couple of days. We wanted to spare you that, and so what we put out, and hopefully we did this effectively, and that was through our flyers and other contacts, we asked people to send in tributes. And the idea of sending in the tributes is so that you have an opportunity where you may not be a formal portion of the program, but to also let it be known publicly of your association and your respect for the work in which Mike had been involved in for a long period of time. So in that booklet that you have, and hopefully everybody has a booklet, there is a copy of each of the tributes in which we received. Mind you, which is always the case when you reach out and ask people to do things like send tributes, there may have been one that did not get to us or may have been even misplaced by us. If that was the case, we apologize in advance. We don't believe that we missed anyone. We believe that everyone who sent in a tribute is, of course, included in the booklet. But in the strange event that the postman didn't make the delivery, we apologize for overlooking a tribute, because we understand that those tributes are very important and a very deep expression on the part of individuals who are here and other individuals to show their great appreciation for the type of life that they shared with Mike. So having said those things, I have the good fortune of I'm not going to actually introduce I don't want to call them a panel because they're not a panel. These are individuals who have all been a part of Mike's life as Mike has been a part of their life. The good thing about Mike is that if you were to look at the breadth of activities that he has been involved in, he pretty much, I think, interacted with all walks of life, would be, I guess, the common phrase that people would talk about. There was a professional side of Mike as a social worker and as a counselor. There was, I know the thing that interested me very early on in my life was the revolutionary side of Mike as a person who worked tirelessly with an array of organizations in order to seek social change, to seek social justice, and so forth. So all of us probably, for sure, interacted with Mike in that regard. I'm going to leave it to the individuals as they come up to kind of fill in, as they should anyway, fill in their particular nuance, if you will, with Mike. So I'm going to just give a kind of very general, and sometimes you might think it's a little too general, introduction and try and move the program along. So first we're going to have, and I should say this as well. The program is generally divided into two halves. The first half are people who are here. We would then have a musical interlude, and there's a gentleman here. If you haven't had an opportunity to go and see him on the blues circuit, you need to make it there, and that is Luther Keith. And then after Luther Keith, structurally, we're going to change out the people at the table with the people who are in the second part of the program. And at that point, after they're done, we will then join in a hopefully a rousing round of a blues song by Louis Armstrong. I should note, for those who don't want to confess that their life intersect with Louis Armstrong, there is a copy of the lyrics for Louis Armstrong, What a Wonderful World, is also included in the booklet here. So if you need to reference that at some point, please do that as well. So the first person who we want to call is Dr. Marvin Sirkin. I don't believe there's probably anyone in this room who does not know Marvin. May not know him personally, but what you do know him through, and this was one of the early books that kind of shaped the lives of a number of us, and that was Detroit, I Do Mind Dying. This was a wonderful, and I think a scholarly rendition of the work of the League of Revolutionary Black Workers and a lot of the activity that led up to that. Dr. Sirkin is a graduate of New York University. He specializes in cooperative urban politics and social change, and he's currently a professor at Long Island University. So with that, and that's all the kind of introductions I'm going to do, because I think what you really want to hear from is the people themselves. So Marvin, if you can come on up.
Good evening, everyone. I'm deeply honored to be here tonight on behalf of Mike Hamlin, and to celebrate his life. Mike was a gentle giant in so many ways. Someone you'd like to hang out with, have a little chat about life, about kids, about making the revolution, about organizing workers, about educating the masses. He was a visionary who put the experience of Mississippi, Detroit, capitalism, war, racism, into how a League of Revolutionary Black Workers could be the foundation, the spark, the engine for building a different kind of America, a new social world. Mike was a leader, a larger-than-life figure who comes along maybe once in a generation, who joined some other outside leaders and visionaries like John Watson, Ken Cockrell, General Baker. Mike founded, led, organized, participated in virtually all of the major organizations of the 60s and 70s, struggling for black liberation, civil rights, and revolution, including DRUM, the League of Revolutionary Black Workers, the Motor City Labor League, the Inner City Voice, the Black Workers Congress, the Black Manifesto, the Black Panthers, SNCC, the Black Education Development Corporation, BEDC, and perhaps others. This man was a revolutionary. I'd like to share a few of Mike's own words on the occasion of the 30-year retrospective and legacy of DRUM and the League, which was reproduced in this book that I co-authored with Detroit, I Do Mind Dying. Mike says, "What distinguished the League of Revolutionary Black Workers was that we were able to engage masses of black workers at a time when people didn't know how to approach or mobilize them. We learned to speak plainly in a language workers understood, but we did not talk down to them. We understood that you had to speak with passion, you had to feel that passion. You had to have the courage to expose yourself as a person with revolutionary ideas and be willing to face the consequences. The League was very good at building a broad coalition of forces. In spite of the problems and some of the contradictions in our message, we went across race and class lines. We were able to organize a group of middle-class white supporters. We had a book club, we had study groups, we had units in colleges and local high schools. We had built a complex of forces that represented our society. Some of the best and brightest people in our community were attracted to the League. We had high-energy talent, we had brilliant legal minds, we had some of the best in-plant organizers this city has ever produced. Courageous people, young and old, joined us. We did not reject street people who came to us, but our focus was on organizing workers and their families. The League leaders spoke from personal experience. Some of us had been in study groups and had a theoretical understanding, but we were not driven by abstractions. I can't emphasize this enough. We personally felt the desperate times. Our personal situations were desperate. Like so many others who took different roads, we felt that it didn't matter if we lived or died. The one sure thing was that we were not going to continue living under the existing conditions any longer. When we said we were willing to die for the people, we actually meant it. That wasn't rhetoric. On the other side, Mike was also a family man, married for a lifetime to Joanne, kids, grandkids, with a background of strong, dedicated women as mentors. Little did I realize in 1969, when I set out to write a book about grassroots efforts to challenge power in America, the historic import of the events of 1967 and its aftermath on the lives of the people of Detroit and on this country. We owe a debt of appreciation, affection, and love for Mike Hamlin, who lived his life to the full who gave every ounce of blood and guts he had, who carried the banner of revolutionary spirit, who walked his talk every day for over 80 years, who said these words, also reproduced in this legacy piece. He said, "I was not an exception to the rule. I came to politics out of my personal experiences of injustice and even atrocities. I was aware that this was a general experience of black people in this country, and not some fault of mine or an experience limited to me. As the years have gone by, my understanding about injustice in this country and throughout the world has deepened. I can't shut out people who are suffering. I've always felt a person needs a commitment to bettering the lives of people. Without that perspective, you won't last very long. You have to hold the high moral ground." Thanks, Mike, for sharing so much with us for a while.
I also want to indicate that although there was another group of people who really helped us a great deal, and this is largely where we met in the over the course of organizing the program, and that was the Source Bookstore. The Source Bookstore, which is located down on Cass Avenue, I hope that all of you take an opportunity to go and spend some time there and see the wide variety of literary works that is on sale at the store. But as a quick step away from the Source Bookstore, we have for you tonight out in the lobby a copy of Mike's book. We're set up so that if you have not had an opportunity to purchase a copy, we would encourage you to do so as well. So with that kind of announcement and adjustment on the program, the next person that we have is John Bracey. And John is another one of these individuals who goes back a substantial period of time with Mike. John is currently with the W.E.B. Du Bois Department of African American Studies at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst. And John, during the period roughly in the 60s, it appears from the information that he was very active in Chicago and participated in civil rights and black liberation movement activity during that period of time. He is a former member of Chicago Friends of SNCC, Chicago Core, and you could probably go on and on with the great number of organizations in which he participated with. I know that in the early days when I was a member of the League, we oftentimes depended on some of the scholarly work that John was producing in terms of rounding out our education as activists. So John, with that, I'd like to invite you up as well.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Sound like my class. I have to wake you up before I put you to sleep. I assume you know who Mike Hamlin is, otherwise you wouldn't be here. So I'm not one of those people that gets up at these events and goes through somebody's details of their life. You know why Mike is important at a certain level, and so I'm not going to talk about that. What I want to talk a bit about is how do we judge Mike and how do we come to understand our generation and how we did what we did and what lessons we can use to carry forward a struggle in the completely chaotic times that we live in today. Before I proceed, I would always tell my audiences nowadays that if it was possible, I would dig up Richard Nixon and Hubert Humphrey and apologize to them. I thought they were the worst people on the planet Earth, and it couldn't get any worse. I would love to have Hubert Humphrey in the Democratic Party and Richard Nixon in the Republican Party. And I have to get that out of the way. That was our time. I'm doing my own, putting my own papers together with a young work-study student who's about 20 years old. And she asked me these questions like, why do you do things, and why did you do this, and wasn't this dangerous, and why did you act and other people didn't act? And I said, I really don't know. And so looking at Mike's life, you know, and it kind of parallels the life of me or General Baker or Chuck Wooten or any number of people who had a revolutionary commitment to struggle during that period. And a lot of it had to do with when we came onto the planet and the circumstances around us. I don't think it had much to do with our individual kind of greatness or anything like that, but we were fortunate enough, you know, to come onto the earth at a time when in fact there were tremendous changes taking place, you know, on the planet itself. And we were born and grew up in the heartland. I know the coasts get all the credit. People talk about New York and California and so forth, but the heart of black struggle in this country, the foundation of black struggle in this country, the most intense forms of struggle in this country have been in the heartland, the Mississippi Valley, you know, from the Allegheny Mountains all the way over to the Rocky Mountains. That's the industrial heartland of this country. It's the Mesabi Range, it's the Great Lakes, it's iron ore, it's steel, you know, it's auto production, it's cattle production, it's grain production. You know, it's the Mississippi River that carries us all the way down to the international trade that goes out through the Panama Canal one way and out into the Atlantic the other way. And we African Americans who were born into that period where we moved out of the South, you know, having built the South with slave labor and moved up into the industrial form of capitalism and encountered, as they said in Detroit, a new plantation, right? Had little choice but to confront those things because that's the form in which we were educated. Had nothing to do with schools. Had nothing to do with schools. It had to do with the transformation in your daily life. And you look at Mike's life, you know, wasn't the schools that educated him? It was the military, discipline, order, confrontation with the barbarism of imperialism. Right? You work, you know, he said a jumper, you know, for a newspaper. Hard, dangerous work, difficult work, not much money. And then you're here in Detroit with auto, right? There is no greater education about American capitalism than at the point of production in an auto plant. There's no book you can read that will teach you that, right? And the issue is, what do you do when you confront that barbarism, that exploitation, that damage to the human soul and spirit, you know, that makes life miserable for a lot of people, you know, and easy for a few people at the top who are extracting your labor, you know. And those of us who saw that and felt that and acted on that are the ones that moved this country in a very powerful kind of way for a very powerful long time. And Mike was one of those people, right? Everybody didn't do that. I don't know why some people did, why some people didn't, right? But I do know that the people that did that, you know, are some of the most extraordinary human beings that ever lived on this planet. You know, they were some of the smartest people that you ever met. You know, Mike and Jen and Chuck, John Watson, right? James Boggs, who wrote about automation 50 years ago, and we kind of laughed at it. Jimmy said, "Oh, these machines are going to take everybody's job." Well, he's talking about these machines, this technical crap. What's he talking about? He was right. He didn't go to college. You learn that in the context of the struggle in which you live. And Mike was part and parcel of that, took up that burden, right? And moved this country in a very significant, powerful way. And we should acknowledge that and not run away from that and not make like it didn't happen, right? And not try to add up revolutionary struggle on some kind of, well, we won this, we won that, we didn't win this, we didn't win that, you know. And you get this from young people who, when they ask you, what did you do and what did you win and what did you accomplish? Right? Because they grew up in a world where they want to see results right away, immediately. You know, why are you still doing this and you're 76 years old? Because I'm not dead yet. When did Mike stop fighting? When did Jen stop fighting? When did Chuck stop fighting? When they died. What else you going to do with your life? Right? And I want to talk a little bit about the discipline part, because we live in a world now where chaos seems to be what people enjoy. The lack of organized, political behavior seems to be what people aspire to. Students get annoyed when I say, I'm glad you can contact, 100 people and you have 100 Twitter followers, but can you get 50 of them in front of you to do something on a sustained basis? And that's not a criticism, that's an observation. I know you can contact 1,000 people across the globe, but can you get 10 of them to come with you to do something? To move something, to demand something, to stay and fight for something? And I'm not saying you should do that, maybe you don't want to do that, but until you do that, the empire is intact. The empire is not afraid of the internet. They want to see you in front of them, pushing them, moving them. And that's Mike's life. Right? It wasn't, whoa, this is really bad, I think I'll go write something about it. Or this is really bad, I think I'll go home and kind of chill out because I might get hurt. No. A life of struggle is a life of confrontation. And I don't know why some people are afraid or not afraid. A student asked me that question, weren't you afraid? I said, I never thought about it. Maybe I was stupid, too dumb to think I should be afraid, but it never occurred to me. All the brothers I know here in Detroit, that they would not take on the most powerful auto companies in the world because they were afraid of them. You took them on because they were powerful. Right? Because to get power, you have to take it from people that have it. And they're not going to give it to you. You're not going to talk them out of it. You're not going to vote them out of it. You're not going to con them out of it. Struggle is struggle. That has not changed. And Mike's life is a testament to that belief. Right? He went through a number of different stages in his life, but at no point did he sit down and chill and say, well, I did that, now I'm going to sit here and enjoy life. It's a life of struggle. Right? And I'll end with a little allegory that I had a South African exchange student that came to me last year, and she was writing on Pauline Hopkins and Olive Schreiner. And I admit I hadn't read much of Olive Schreiner. And so I went looking for Olive Schreiner, and I found that Howard Thurman had collected her writings. It was the first collection of this white South African woman's writings in the U.S. back in the 1930s. And Thurman was moved by an amazing passage that talked about, and this is an allegory, one of Olive Schreiner's Dreams. It's a book called Dreams, kind of poems and kind of musings. And she talks about a young woman who's seeking the land of freedom. And she goes down to the edge of the water and looks. And she says, wow, like I'm here alone. Like how can I get across to the land of freedom? Right? And you have Reason, an old man who comes to her and who represents reason. And he tells her, be quiet, listen. And these are beautiful words, very powerful words. What do you hear? And she said, I hear the sound of feet 1,000 times 10,000 and thousands of thousands, and they beat this way. He said, they are the feet of those that shall follow you. Lead on, make a track to the water's edge. Where you stand now, the ground will be beaten flat by 10,000 times 10,000 feet. And he said, have you seen the locusts? How they cross a stream. First one comes down to the water edge and it is swept away. And then another comes, and then another, and then another. And at last, with their bodies piled up, a bridge is built, and the rest pass over. She said, and of those that come first, some are swept away and are heard of no more. Their bodies do not even build a bridge. And are swept away and are heard of no more. And what of that, the man said. And what of that, she said. She said, they make a track to the water's edge. They make a track to the water's edge, she said, and over that bridge which shall be built with our bodies, who will pass? And he said, the entire human race. And the woman grasped her staff and turned and headed down to the edge of the river. That's the world we live in. It might be that we will see freedom at some point, but probably not. Not in my lifetime. We might be lucky enough to be the ones over whose bodies people can walk into freedom and justice and equality. Might not, right? But we all can, every last one of us, and this is what Mike did. He led a track to the water's edge, that you will know which way to go to fight for freedom. So you don't judge it about, well, did we win? What did we get? You know, we must have lost because all the auto plants disappeared. No, that's not the way you look at it. Right? What you look at is that Mike was one of those people, you know, that headed toward freedom, dedicated his life toward moving freedom. And if you want to know how to get that way, you follow people like Mike, and they will lead you, right, to where the struggle is. They will make that track to the water's edge, you know. And people like that should be remembered for that, you know, and not how much money they made, and not how many things they accumulated, and not how big an organization they had, but what they did with their life. And Mike's life is worthy of emulation and gratitude, you know, and celebration, because he will be one of those people when we get somewhere 3 generations from now, 4 generations from now, that we can look back upon and say, we followed in his footsteps, you know, to a path that he charted, you know, that his feet beat down the grass that we didn't have to cut our way through. And that's a life worth living. There's no greater life than that, you know. And I'm grateful to say that I was privileged, you know, in my lifetime to know people like that, to be surrounded by people like that, you know. And Mike was one of the greatest of those. And there were a lot of great people. You know, and Mike was one of the greatest of those. And I think we should acknowledge that, you know, and keep that, and don't forget that, you know. And don't let small kind of petty things get in the way of honoring that. And don't let people talk you out of that because they think somebody was smarter or this, that, or the other. You know, courage and dedication and commitment are rare these days, you know. But we have these examples that we can build upon, you know. And Mike Hamlin's life is a premier example of how one can live a life, you know, a life of commitment that will get us to freedom, you know. Maybe not today, but at some time in the future where we all want to go, you know. And we should never, ever forget that, you know, and never denigrate that, you know, and never diminish the contributions that people made because we didn't win final victory in our lifetime, you know. And so I just want to salute, you know, the memory of Mike Hamlin. He was a brother and he was a comrade. And, you know, I hope to see more of him again and the younger people that come after us. Thank you very much.
Let me also just indicate, when you first arrived today, there was a slideshow that was playing in the background. We're going to repeat that show a little later, but this slideshow was put together by several members of the committee, and I don't want to miss anyone's name, but I do know who led the process more than anybody else, and that was Ken Castle. And Ken is probably working someplace, but please note, I don't know that I see him. Oh, there he is, over here. Please note that a lot of the work associated with that slideshow was done by Ken, and our hope, I don't know if we figured out the technical part of it yet, but our hope is to find some place on the internet that we can put that slideshow up so that people like you can have access to it at later dates, okay? Let me also just say that aside from putting Mike in historical context and especially the challenge that Mike, along with many others, took up, there was also another side of Mike in which people understood to be kind of like the professional side of Mike. I mean, you don't raise such a wonderful family and not be employed. I mean, you might be visited by some unemployment every now and then, but you got to have a job. And Mike's profession in that regard was he is a social worker. And Mike was not just the standard social worker who was trying to find, let's say, not that these things are unimportant, but he was not the one that was trying to find, say, housing for the homeless and things like that. And I'm sure at some point in his career he did all of those traditional things that social work is involved in. But Mike and his understanding of the importance of working people got involved and used his social work profession really to push the United Automobile workers to an area where they really created and fortified an employee assistance programs. And a lot of people just don't know that particular element with Mike. When people went into the plants and dealing with the day-to-day rigors of the plant, you needed to take a break. You needed some counseling sometimes. The pressures were such that there was a need for intervention at times. So there was a professional side of Mike, and one of the persons who kind of walked that journey with Mike on that professional side is the next person, who is Charles Simmons. And Charles, I should say this, there are two Charles Simmons in the house. I should say this, okay? One of them is sitting over here, and all of us go back years and years with Dr. Charles Simmons. And so, not that Charles, but this Charles, okay? And I do want people to recognize that Charles is in the house. Okay. So what this Charles Simmons is going to do is kind of give you some idea of the work on the professional side, the EAP, the Employment Assistance Program, in which he and Mike and as I'm told, a wide range of really talented and professional people who kind of made up the group, who really gave legs to the EAP program at the UAW. So, Charles, if I could ask you to come on up.
Good evening. I ain't gonna be long, but I'm gonna be long as it takes for me to get my point across. First of all, let me verify this. My name is Charlie. C-H-A-R-L-I-E, not C-H-A-R-L-E-S. We got that, Charles? Okay, you got it, all right. Okay, so I'm gonna tell you a little story about Mike. I worked with Mike, and I'm from Local 600, UAW. We was an EAP rep, but Mike got that changed to ESSP. I met Mike in 1989, and the first time I set eyes on Mike, I thought he was Don King. And they said, Mike Hamlin, I said, he looked like Don King. But that was a mistake I made. I gotta have this mic up, man. I'm tired of bending over. But anyway, when I met Mike and I took over the ESSP program, Mike had a group and it was called Tough Love. It was for the alcoholics, drug abuse, and any other thing you wanted. We had women's in there, we had men's in there, and Mike ran the group. And Mike's main word was, "You are known damn fool." Okay? So everybody that comes into the group, we would say the first thing when they get through speaking who they was and they was an addict and all this, we say, "You a known damn fool." You know. And Mike ran the program with an iron fist, and he loved that program. He loved it so much, he was talking about it when he was sick, how it had started going downhill because all of the older ESSP reps had retired, and we didn't train the new ESSP reps. So he was trying to get us to go down to Solidarity House and meet with Jimmy Sellers and try to get us to train the young guys as ESSP reps now. And I said, Mike, I'm retired. I say, when I retired, I forgot what the word meant, ESSP. I said, I got a t-shirt now that says, if you want something done, do it your damn self, okay? And he didn't like that. But that was Mike. You know, Mike was dedicated to helping people. See, and I was dedicated to getting paid. If you ain't paying me, don't call me, okay? Because I ain't doing nothing for nothing. But anyway, we had a shooting in the Rouge, and Mike had to do this critical incident debrief. And it was in my unit, the maintenance unit. So Mike and I worked 15 hours straight for 7 days a week. Now, I don't know what the value option paid Mike, but I didn't get paid for 8 hours, Joanne. And I know I took him away from you because I called him at home. But anyway, Mike went on to say, Mike had a way with peoples, you know, and he let the people do the talking, and then Mike would just emphasize what could happen and what didn't happen, you know. And it was a lot of white peoples and a lot of black peoples in the Rouge. So I was getting kind of worried because the maintenance unit was 80% white, 20% black, okay? And here a black guy trying to tell some white guys what's happening in the Rouge. And they really didn't like it, but they couldn't do nothing about it, you know, because Mike don't take no shortcuts, he tell you the truth, you know. So here I am taking Mike's side, and I'm saying, yeah, he's right. I said, you want to fight? Fight me, you know. And Mike said, ain't gonna be none of that, you know. But most of the problem we had was with the committeemen when the Rouge shooting occurred. And I had told Mike before the incident happened that something like this was going to happen. He told me to go downtown and talk to Ernie. I went downtown 3 times to talk to Ernie, and he wasn't in office, so he never did call me. He didn't even call me after the incident. But I want to say this. Mike loved to help people, you know. Mike's legacies is good. Any man that can keep up with Mike's legacy, he has done something in this world. You know, I'm just a little small peon behind Mike, so. But I love Mike. Mike taught me my job. You know, I mean, I didn't know what to do. I had just come on as the ESSP rep. And Mike took me by the hand and showed me what to do, when to do it, and how to do it, you know. And I appreciate that. But I want to say this. He didn't have no love for Mississippi. I don't know what happened in Mississippi, but he didn't have no love for Mississippi. But I want to say to you guys now, Mike has a great legacy. Like Mike fought for freedom, He fought for civil rights. He fought to help people, you know. That legacy there is enough for me. I don't need to get into the other details that everybody else been talking about, because I'm boring you to death, you know. But Joanne, we love you still. And if you need me, call me. I work for free.
Who was very significant to any number of our development, is in the House as well, and that's Marion Kramer Baker. And I just want to point her out over here. Anybody who went through a lot of these experiences, and if you did not have an opportunity to intersect with Marion and have her really like set you straight on any number of things, you may have missed the entire 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and on up to today. But I do want everyone to know that Marion, and if you take the time and you go through the booklet, people like Harry Belafonte also saw fit to recognize the importance of Mike, and we recorded that, of course, in the booklet here. And there were a variety of other people. But since we're switching this up, the next baddest sister in town, in my opinion, I had the occasion to go over to the Charles Wright Museum the other day, and Dr. Melba Boyd was on the program, and one of the, she's not going to perform this tonight unless we geek her up to it, but she performed a form called I Want My City Back, which was just phenomenal. In this particular case, she's going to perform or read a poem that was authored by Michelle Russell Gibbs, and I use both of those names because different people may know Michelle at different parts of her life as well. That poem is part of Mike's book that, again, not that I'm selling the book, but it is outside. And I would like to, I first met Melba, and as you notice, it's Melba Joyce Boyd. The time in which the name Boyd, aside from Melba's academic activity and even, well, aside from that, there was another period in Detroit's history where the Boyd name was front and center. And that had to do with the police conducting a massive manhunt for 3 individuals, and this was pursuant to one of the stress encounters. And it was John Percy Boyd, Mark Bethune, and Hayward Brown. And in fact, we represented Hayward in that regard. Melba's family was personally touched during that period of time, because I think when I first met Melba, it was right after the police had run into family members of your home in search for the 3 individuals that I just named, and they were wreaking havoc throughout the entire Detroit community. And I think they probably ran literally a couple of hundred raids on homes within the Detroit area, and Melba's family was touched by that. So it's fitting to have Melba come up and join us tonight.
Good evening. I want to express my condolences to Mike's family, to Joanne, children, grandchildren. On behalf of the Department of African American Studies and many persons who cannot be here today because we're in summer, and so most of the faculty is, away doing their research, etc. Professor David Goldberg is here, who had a close relationship, I think, with Mike, and We valued having Mike to be able to teach for us, to have someone who had such extensive knowledge and experience. He was sort of the perfect marriage between theory and praxis. And so when he retired, it was Bill Bryce who actually suggested, wouldn't it be great for Mike to teach? I said, yeah, that's a good idea. So we miss him, and we really appreciate having him as a member of our faculty. Mike is the kind of person who is always there. He was always there. Whenever something went down, he was there. And I've known him so long, I don't remember when I met him, which is a good thing. He's just part of the fabric of my life, and he was there when I needed him as a friend, when we needed him to be with us on the front line of struggle, and he will be sorely missed, but not forgotten, and that's your job, David, because he's actually working on a piece now that I think will bring part of Mike's legacy forward. So we're still, doing it. I was asked by Joanne to read a poem by Michelle Gibbs. Michelle I've known as long as I've known Mike, and in fact she did the artwork for my first collection of poetry in 1978. And Michelle cannot be here, so I will read her poem. It's entitled, Just Wait. You see, I remember when the Detroit movement riffed. We didn't only write our politics, we sang them to the world, acted them out, harmonized as one, and cut a record for all time. Even when we marched, we danced, out from the plants with manifestos, calling for Black power in a Black town's Revolutionary Union Movement hour, onto the rooftops and into the streets, closing down the assembly line, 'cause we don't mind working, but we do mind dying. And we finally got the news how our dues were being used. As the blind led the blind, not over a bluff, but to a land, Stevie Wonder, full where we had just enough for the city. And we defined what's going on, spelled out RESPECT for more than one generation. Yeah, those were the days when what was said burned in the heads of hundreds of thousands and led us to do whatever we had to in pursuit of life, liberty, and justice too. 'Cause ain't no stopping us now, and we trained our feet to step to a beat that shook the foundations of power. Oh yeah, we had more than 1 hour of triumph on the stage. Beat back the police in the form of stress, defeated a racist police commissioner to elect Coleman A. Young, Detroit's first Black mayor, reformed the jury selection system, enforced residency requirements for cops, freed the New Bethel Panthers, Hayward Brown, Madeline Fletcher, and James Johnson, ran for office independently and won a class action AIME'd at Detroit Edison, dared to call for economic redistribution. That was the 70s, and we weren't playing. But all that was smashed, replaced by stadiums and casinos, though you can hear the songs on CD and maybe even up the next alley. That is our hope, that the songs never die, as with the movement and memory their lyrics imply. Yeah, nowadays, Motown's energy lays in the wings, preparing for a gig, a call, a cause, a moment worth interrupting our daily practicing in woodsheds underground, solid brick houses, or public places, reclaimed for a hot minute before sunset in the too brief summer. we still be here, but dug in deep like the river, impeccably blue, dense hues mirroring our faces, the current, our voices, willows, our tendency to bend just so low before springing up to seize the next fresh breeze and blow with it. Yeah, we time in our entrance for the upbeat, and don't worry, we ain't never been late. Just wait. Thank you, Michelle Gibbs.
Mike enjoyed the blues. He loved the blues, and we thought it would be fitting, if you will, to ask Luther, one of Detroit's local blues sensations. You know, I'm getting into this, right? Local blues sensations to come up and perform for us. It's interesting to note that Luther met Mike in the same way that Ken Cockrell, for example, met Mike. They were loading newspapers down on the docks at the Detroit News. And, that's how Mike and Ken got together. And Luther was part of that experience. And it's fitting to have Luther here, given the kind of connection that he had with Mike to perform for us this evening.
I met Mike on the loading dock to the Detroit News. I was about 19 years old. He was about 15 years older than me. Okay? And I was 19. I was majoring in journalism at the University of Detroit and working for the most conservative paper in the city. There are other people who use other words for it, which I said I would never work for this newspaper as a journalist. And I proceeded to graduate and do 34 years there, but that's another story. But I watched Mike talk, and he knew I was young, and I was in journalism school. I didn't want to be a truck driver, but I made good money. As a matter of fact, I took a pay cut because I was a Teamster. I took a pay cut to become a reporter after I graduated because the unions took care of us. But anyway, I would listen to Mike talk about, this would have been 1969, 70, 71, 72. You know what was going on in our nation in Detroit. And I would hear him talk about revolution and black folks this and power that. And I said, either this guy is crazy or he's the next Malcolm X. I couldn't, but most importantly, he was Mike. And that's why we're here. And I heard him talk about a year ago at some event. And I hadn't seen him for years. And he got up and he said something. I said, he is still a revolutionary. He has not changed. So, and in times like these, we need. So, I want to do a couple songs. One song I wrote kind of ripped from the headlines of today. I wrote this little thing called Detroit Blues. Has anybody here ever had the Detroit Blues? Do you know what I'm talking about? Detroit Blues coming down on me so strong. Detroit Blues coming down on me so strong. Detroit Blues, will you ever leave me alone? I got a job with the city. I put in 10 years' time. Emergency man, I come along. Now I'm in the unemployment line. Detroit Blues coming down on me so strong. Detroit Blues, will you ever leave me alone? I want my little girl to learn. I said, go to school and don't clown. Now the superintendent say, hey, gotta close the school down. Detroit Blues coming down so strong. Detroit Blues, will Will you ever leave me alone? Will you ever leave me alone? I got a job at the liquor store, try to make a little extra bread. Man walked in with a pistol, put a gun to my head. A Detroit blues coming down on me so strong. Detroit blues, will you ever leave me alone? Now I still love my city. I know one day it will rise, but until that day comes, keep asking myself why Detroit blues coming down on me so strong. Detroit blues, will you ever, one day, this year, in the next 10 years, will you ever leave me alone? Detroit blues. Thank you. You know what's funny? I got an email from Greg, and that song is on my last CD, but songs come to you in all kinds of funny ways. And, you know, I was a journalist for a long time. I actually didn't pick up a guitar till I was in my 30s and wasn't any good for about 15 years. So I got a late start, but Greg called me to do this, and this song, this next song kind of came to me, and everything I've heard here tonight tells me that this song is really what Mike was all about. I call it the man who took a stand. He didn't care about the trends. He didn't care about no poll. He didn't care about being popular. He didn't care to do what he was told. He was the man that took a stand. The man that took a stand, standing tall through it all. He was the man that took a stand. Y'all know what I'm saying? You want to march? You say, I march with you. You need a hand? Say, I got two. You say you're scared? You say, don't be scared. I'm standing right with you. You was the man that took a stand. The man that took a stand. Standing tall through it all. You was the man that took a stand. Are y'all feeling this yet? You see what I'm trying to say? Yeah. He saw wrong, try to make it right. He worked all day, fight all night. Spoke truth to power. And he never ran in the darkest hour. He was the man that took a stand. The man that took a stand. Standing tall through it all. He was the man that took a stand. I got one more thing to say. I'm gonna need y'all to help me on this one. Mike Hamlin was his name. Justice was his flame. Let freedom ring. You know, everybody sing. Mike Hamlin was his. Can y'all help me? Mike Hamlin was his name. Can y'all say that? Mike Hamlin was his name. Mike Hamlin was his name. Come on, y'all, help me now. Let me hear you say it. Mike Hamlin was his name. 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 Let freedom ring. Now everybody sing. Mike Hamlin was his name. Mike Hamlin was his name. Let freedom ring. Now everybody sing. Mike Hamlin was his name. He was the man who took a stand. The man who took a stand. Standing tall through it all. He was the man that took a stand. Mike Hamlin. Mike Hamlin. Mike, you know you hear me, Mike. Mike Hamlin was his name. Mike Hamlin was his name. Let freedom ring. Everybody sing. Mike Hamlin was his name. All right, thank you.
Luther, Batman Keith. Luther met Mike down in the shipping docks, and I mentioned that Ken Cockrell likewise met Mike during that period of time. I did see, and she may have gone, but Sheila Cockrell was also in the house. Moving the program, let me just quickly say something about Mike Goldfield. Mike was a former in-plant labor activist, means that he was involved. He took a stand much like the other individuals that we have talked about and the history in which we've been exploring tonight. He was a member of the Black Workers Congress. He's currently a professor at Wayne State University, specializing in questions of race and labor, and he has, he's the author of numerous books. The one I know that I spent the most time was The Color of Politics, Race, and the Mainsprings of American Politics.
Yeah, thank you, Jay. Good evening, everybody. So, I met Mike almost 50 years ago. Have known him as a close friend, comrade, big brother. I think what Luther said rang sort of true. Mike was not that much older than many of us, but we thought of him when he was in his early 30s as the old man, which has an ironic twist for many of us at this time. So my wife and I stayed with him and Joanne when we moved to Detroit over 25 years ago. Before we got settled, Mike told me where to live, got me a car, told me that I couldn't go visiting union halls in this old Toyota, so he said, here's the Ford Taurus that you're going to buy, and much more. So in the 60s, I'd been active in SDS, Students for Democratic Society, was expelled from school in the late 60s for helping lead a protest where we took over an administration building, and as an aspiring revolutionary, that didn't bother me because I thought my place, in any case, was working in a factory. And the mecca for revolutionary labor organizing at that time was Detroit, where I soon went to visit. So let me step back a little bit in terms, because a lot of the narrative of the 60s has been taken over by the establishment and the media. So in the history of the civil rights movement, the establishment story places Martin Luther King and the group of ministers around him and in the Southern Christian Labor Conference at the center. But in my view, much more important was the SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, who led the struggle, first electrifying the nation in 1960 with sit-ins in hundreds of segregated Southern lunch counters from Virginia all the way down to Mississippi and Alabama, and who sent many of their shock troops into Mississippi, where many other groups were reluctant to go, risking their lives on a daily basis, and some of them dying and continuing to organize. And the more radical phrase of the Black liberation movement, we hear a lot about the Black Panther Party, and without denying their importance, for many of us radicals and activists, it was the Dodge Revolutionary Union Movement and the League of Revolutionary Black Workers here in Detroit that not only inspired hundreds of black caucuses around the country, but pointed the way for many of us towards a revolutionary future. And at the center of all this was Mike. He was the chairman of the League, and he was surrounded, as many people have noted, with an incredibly talented, driven, brilliant group of compatriots. And John Watson, who along with Mike established the Inner City Voice. Later, John became the editor of Wayne State's newspaper and turned it into a radical Detroit newspaper. Ken Cockrell Sr., Melba Boyd, who we just heard from, General Baker, who was the leader of Drum, Marion Kramer Baker, Luke Tripp, John Williams, and many others. And Mike was later to play the same role in the Black Workers' Congress. So Mike not only helped hold together and coordinated these organizations, but reached out, and this later held him in good stead as a social worker, but he reached out to broaden the reach of all the main organizations that he headed. He recruited people from other movements, from SNCC, which I believe was the most dynamic of the civil rights movement. He brought in James Foreman, who was the former executive secretary, and along with many others. One of those we brought in, one of my early heroes and later close friend and comrade, was Donald Stone. And much is made of King's anti-war position coming out against the war in 1966. And by this time, thousands of young people were refusing the draft. Now, it's one thing for thousands of people to be refusing the draft in Oakland or even in Detroit, California, or even in Detroit. Acts of bravery, to be sure. Donald Stone in '63 refused the draft in rural Alabama and faced risking his life to do that. So Mike was able to pull in lots of these radical and courageous people from the civil rights movement into the League and the Black Workers' Congress. As is mentioned, he helped recruit white radicals through book clubs, the Motor City Labor League, and from the plants. And he was even active in the 70s in an important mass organization, which many people have forgotten, the African Liberation Support Committee, which was one of the first organizations to really take up and mount large protests around South Africa. And he would recount to me and others how he had recruited hundreds of nationalist black campus radicals and won them to revolutionary Marxism. And all these activities were supportive and tied to the then growing struggle in the nation's workplaces, which I was involved at that time in Chicago and through the Black Workers' Congress. And Mike really played the key role in pulling all these pieces together in the organizations he was in. So the revolution, which we all thought was coming, stalled and did not succeed, but there were many impressive results. So reforms, more often than not, come on the heels of much more radical mass struggles. So arguably, one result from the struggles of groups like the League was to open up the skilled trades around the country, professional and managerial positions, to minorities, and even at times to women, which had previously, these occupations had been overwhelmingly, if not completely, white and male. For the most part, even for those of us who participated, these days may seem like distant memories, and the movements had basically run out of steam, mostly by the late 70s. Still, they provide important lessons for all of us for the next wave of struggle, which I believe is sure to come at some point. And if you want to know more about the League and Mike's other activities, one could start by Sirkin and Giorgiakis' book, Detroit, I Do Mind Dying. There's also the League film, Finally Got the News, which we used to hand around to each other in these sort of disintegrating celluloid reels, and eventually DVDs came out, and now you can click on YouTube And if you haven't seen the league film, get on YouTube, click, and you can sit there at your computer. Some people, young people do it on their phones or whatever and watch the league film. And then, of course, and Greg said he wasn't going to plug it, but Mike's autobiography about his life and struggle is for sale out there, and if you don't have a copy, you should get it. So Mike's life, as sad as his passing it is for many of us, and I miss him greatly, the radical movements in which he was involved provide lessons and inspirations for future struggles. And if one watches the league film, as I know many people here have, you'll see that one of the huge banners in some of the demonstrations has a quote from Mao Zedong, the leader of the Chinese Revolution, and it says, "Fight, fail, fight, fail, fight, fail, and then fight on to final victory." So we're at the sort of first fight, fail stage, and we've got a ways to go. Or we have a quote from Che, or as Che Guevara, the Cuban revolutionary, frequently said, "Hasta la victoria siempre," which I would freely translate, "until the final victory." So let's honor and remember Mike's memory, along with the memory of Brother Mike Hamlin and his vision for a better future.
The next person who we'd like to have them address you tonight is really a person, all of us who come up here, we claim that we go back with Mike. Well, here's a person who really goes back with Mike, and that's Garnett Hagerman. And Garnett went to high school with Mike. Most of us can't claim high school with Mike, but he can. And Mike actually, given the relationship that they developed in high school, some would say that Mike followed him up to followed Garnett up to the University of Michigan. So I don't want to take any particular thunder away from some of the personal stories that only Garnett knows. But I do want him to share some of that with you all. This is Mike's lifelong, long, well, I don't want to keep with the long stuff, but he goes back more than any of us with Mike. Garnett?
Good evening. One correction. I met Mike in elementary school more than 71 years ago. We've been very, very close friends for over 71 years. And it was a shock to me to hear of his passing. I knew that he had not been well. And that always comes as a shock to any of us that loves someone. And I'd like to thank Joanne for giving Mike the kind of life that he always wanted. With Mike, family came first, always, when he was growing up and when he married you. Children, grandchildren, that meant so much to him. And he delighted in talking about them and you. Mike and I, as I said a moment ago, met when we were, I think, in the 4th grade. And whatever happened, we ended up becoming friends, very close friends, very quickly. And that friendship lasted over 7 decades. All the way through high school, we played sports together. And at the funeral, I made the comment about Mike ended up playing not organized sports when he was in Mississippi. He played a little football, never played tennis, And I was a tennis, won't say star, but I love tennis. And I talked him into coming out on the tennis team. And he says, no, I don't know how to play tennis. So on the weekends, he and I would go up to the tennis courts and hit a few balls back and forth. And by the end of that next season, Mike was playing first singles, a position that I used to hold. I learned then, he did the same thing in football. I learned then that Mike would pursue anything that he had his mind set to do. And he would not just pursue it, but he would excel at it. He was that way with his books, academics. He was that way with sports. And he was just that way with life. If something came up that bothered him, the view of him on the front of your programs, I've seen that view, that pose of him many an evening in our dorm. We went away to college together up at the University of Michigan. And the first year, we couldn't get to room together. And because I had sent my application in much ahead of Mike's, and they had already assigned me to someone. And then when he decided and sent his application in and was accepted, we tried to get together but couldn't. So we lived in dorms across the street from one another. And most of the time I was over in his room bothering him and his roommate, and he was over in my room bothering my roommate but not bothering me. And we ended up together in the dormitory that he was living in our second year. And in the evening, during studies, sitting around studying and getting a break from it, we would just sit and talk about life. And Mike used to lament about the things that he saw in Mississippi, the things that his family had to put up with in Mississippi. And he was so happy when he moved here to Michigan, but saw some of the very same things. And I think in time, after Mike left the University of Michigan and working at the Detroit News, he was in the workforce then. And so he began to see some of the things that the black workers had to put up with. But let's go back to Ann Arbor. Some of the things that I remember fondly. We both worked in the cafeteria, in the dining hall, and we got paid once a month. And that was our spending change. And it was about $50, $51, $52 after the taxes were taken out. And after we went to the bank and cashed our checks, the first thing that we would do was go over to Chicken in the Basket. That was a restaurant in Ann Arbor on Main Street that had a big sign up, the chicken in the basket and all the homemade biscuits you could eat. After we left there, I think they took the sign down. I remember the first night we went there, you get, I think it was 3 or 4 pieces of chicken in a basket, and then the homemade biscuits. And after we finished the chicken, we started on the biscuits. And they served honey with the biscuits. And that's some good eating. We would sit for better than an hour, asking the waitress to bring us more biscuits. The chicken was gone. Bring us more biscuits. And one night, this was about our 3rd visit there, over a period of 3 months, they finally asked us to leave. And if you know Mike, by the time Mike got through talking with the waitress, she went and got the manager. And when he got finished with the manager, they brought us more biscuits. Mike had a way of convincing people about anything. But the real story about Mike, and I think many of you who know him have seen that, he was not an aggressive, angry person, but he was very passionate about anything that he pursued. Very, very passionate. And when it came to, pardon me, came to his life in the world of work with the Detroit News and loading dock, and then ultimately he drove the truck, he began to see how so many of the minority workers were treated. And that, I think, led him to the revolutionary ideas that he espoused. He wasn't angry, he wasn't mad, but he would, in a discussion, he was very logical and pointed at getting his point across. No anger, no raising of his voice, but he could calm the waters, so to speak. He was a very loving and caring person, but he was definitely set out to be the person that would do the most for the underclass, for people who were treated unfairly, people who had very little going for them. It was because of Mike I ended up going into education. From junior high school on, I always wanted to be a surgeon. I wanted to be a doctor. And one night in our dorm room, we were talking. And he said, "Why do you want to go into medicine?" And I told him that, I said, with all the ills that face mankind, I'd like to think that someday I would be responsible for coming up with a solution to some of those illnesses, if not just one. And he said, "No, the greatest illness to mankind is illiteracy. That's where you have to start. You have to start with their mind and their education before you work about sickness and illness. Because there are too many people in this world, especially our people, who are not properly educated." And he used to tell me stories about the schools in Mississippi, what they were lacking, and what the job that they had to do, they couldn't do. And so for that very reason, I switched from going into medicine and became a teacher and a principal and a superintendent. But I did go into education. And that's interesting because both of my parents were educators, and in later years my dad became an undertaker, and neither one of us kids wanted to follow in that along those lines. But it was because of Mike that while in college, I made that switch and had my curriculum revised to be able to pursue that. I remember one time while we were in school up at Ann Arbor, I was coming home for the weekend and he wasn't. And he said, "Well, if you have time, run by the house and see if Mom has any money to send me." And his mother was just like a mother to me, and my mother was just like a mother to him. Because if you saw one of us, you saw both of us. And I went by the house, and his mother gave me some money and said, "Tell Mike that this is all I could spare right now." And she says, "Oh, I just finished," this was a Sunday evening, "I just finished baking a cake. And I know you guys like the cakes that I bake. And here, take this cake," up to him. and she cut just a little sliver off. And his sister, Eddie Mae, was sitting there looking. And she looked at me like, boy, if looks could kill. She was a little upset with me taking that cake back up to Ann Arbor because her mother had just finished baking it, and they hadn't even had a piece of it. Mike will be missed, but Mike leaves a legacy second to none. There's so much that he left, especially to his family and to his friends, because he was a person that once you met him, you'd never forget him. He was a very conscientious person, a very soft-spoken person, and a person determined to accomplish what he set out to accomplish. And he accomplished so much with the family. He used to delight in telling me he's getting ready to go overseas to Europe to visit one of the kids, he and Joanne. It was hard for me to keep up with him because he really got around the world in that way. So again, to Joanne and the family, I'd like to thank you, Joanne, for bringing out the things in him that I knew were always there, but I couldn't bring them out, but you did. God bless you.
One of the most important things in Mike's life, from Mike's perspective, was, of course, his family. I would think that before the night is over, that you would take the time to come up and exchange with Mike's family, who were largely seated in the front row up in this area here. And looks that there's a whole range of family members who are here, all the way down to some grandchildren, for example. One of them who's already gone to sleep. So we're gonna move this. But another one of Mike's family is the next speaker. And what struck me through when we were working with the committee is that she distinguished herself as not only being Mike's niece, and you can imply what you want in that regard, but she said that she took essentially her professional clue, if you will, her professional guidance and so forth from Mike. That the idea of becoming a social worker and to work with in the area of substance abuse counseling and so forth was dear to her as it was to Mike. And I would like to invite to the podium Alina Williams, who is Mike's niece.
Good evening. It's an honor and privilege to stand before you today and talk about the impact that my Uncle Mike had on my life. A few weeks after his death, I came across a quote. This quote by Dr. Huey P. Newton reads, "The revolution has always been in the hands of the young. The young always inherit the revolution." I saw this and immediately thought of my uncle, the revolutionary. It's hard to hear the word revolution and not think of him, his life, his legacy, and its impact on my own personal revolution. Looking back, I realized that from a very young age, he was always pouring messages of service and resistance into me, and they truly shaped who I am today. So the young inherit the revolution. I'll take that. Because from Uncle Mike, what I inherited was a sense of power and passion, a true love for education and humility, and a commitment to social justice. It is really amazing to me the impact that he has had on me. I went to U of M too, Garnett, and I started off pre-med. And it was really unknowingly that he shaped this path for me. And I'm following in his footsteps, really big footsteps. As a social worker and a community advocate. And when I look at his life, I just feel so empowered to push on. We all know that he was a man of many words, but he was also a man of even more actions. And he truly led by example. Since my childhood, he provided examples of strength, love, patience, and guidance. I loved our family gatherings and trips to the cottage and weekend visits at his home. As an adult, these examples grew in depth and meaning for me. The love he gave to Joanne and their children showed me an example of what a great man, a great husband, and a great father is. And I knew that any man that I brought around had to pass Uncle Mike's test. My husband passed. So through Uncle Mike, I saw a man not only committed to his family, but committed to people. His life and his work touched so many people. It is truly amazing to me that I had someone so influential with such a wide reach, a phone call away all my life. I can recall talking to my friend Bianca, who's here tonight, about her research. She's out in California working on her PhD on student movements in the city of Detroit. And I said to her, you should talk to my Uncle Mike. He's done a lot in the 60s. Lots kind of understatement. And she said, wait a minute, what's your uncle's last name? Because me and Bianca, we went to high school together. So before I got married, when we were at Southwestern, shout out to DPS, I was Alina Hamlin. And so I said, it's Mike Hamlin, that's my uncle. And she's like, wait a minute. It's like world stopped. Mike Hamlin is your uncle? And I'm like, yeah, he's my uncle, Mike Hamlin. And my friend couldn't believe that Mike Hamlin was my uncle. Mike Hamlin, the civil rights leader and labor organizer, was my uncle. So it was at that moment where my friend put his life and his work in a different perspective for me. I know the great things that he's done. He's touched my life and so many people. But my friend's out in California for years researching and studying the work that he's done. It's pretty amazing. So his life is an example of the huge difference one person can make. He touched not hundreds, but thousands, and that impact will live on for years to come. I sometimes get overwhelmed by the oppressive structure of the world that we live in. And I know that the work that Uncle Mike did and his colleagues and all these wonderful people that came before me fighting for change, it has caused change. But a lot of things have stayed the same. James Baldwin said it best: to be Black and conscious in America is to be in a constant state of rage. I know that feeling of rage, the pain and anger of injustice, and Uncle Mike knew that feeling too. His life is an example of what to do with that rage. He turned rage into work, and that work created power, power to organize, power to inspire, and power to change. I'm so thankful for his life and the memories that I will forever cherish. Memories full of love and wisdom, encouragement and advice, strength and hope and laughter. He had a really great laugh and a real good sense of humor. I can recall him joking about his memorial that one day somebody would stand up and say, he was a great man. Well, he was a great man, one of the greatest men I will ever know. I'm so grateful for my Uncle Mike, for his burning desire to be a change agent, for lighting a fire, and blazing a trail, and now passing me the torch. I promise I will keep it going, through service to our people, our family, and our community. Thank you.
Probably with the insistence of her family and other people, Joanne did make a contribution, and you have it in the booklet here as a tribute from Joanne to her husband, Mike. So I would ask people to spend time with that when you reflect upon the life of Mike. Second kind of personal question that came up is that, yes, this is a celebration of life, but the downside, of course, is a person that we all love and will miss is no longer with us. And we wanted to, in addition to give a wide array of experiences, we also wanted Mike's family to be very much a part of how this was organized, what face we would put forth to the public, and so forth. And after some, I think, internal search in their family, what the family agreed upon is Alex to represent the family tonight. And I think everyone, if you don't know Alex, you're not going to hear it from me. This is Mike's son, and Alex is going to come up and give you his sense of the importance of Mike, not only as this leader that we are tending to talk about, but also as his father.
One thing my dad would always do at family gatherings was to bring his grandkids up, because he wanted everyone to know how important that generation was to him. And he always felt like they would carry the torch, and they were just so important. So I thought it was important to bring them up. Through this whole process, I've heard a lot said about my dad and the different phases of his life. I knew him through most. I knew him as my father. I knew him as a social worker and the crisis counselor. But I've learned a lot about the period of his life before I was born, and especially with the 50th anniversary of the '67 rebellion. It's been wonderful to hear all these stories, all the stories and tributes to my dad. And I haven't had a chance to read the program yet, but I certainly plan on it. He was a wonderful father and a great role model, and I do miss him. But mainly, I just want to thank everybody. Thank you for coming and sharing your stories of his, how he's touched your lives. I've seen a lot of people who, in addition to family, I've seen a lot of extended family who I know he's had a great effect on. So I just wanted to thank everybody. Thank you, family and friends. Thank you very much for coming.
I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. On behalf of Mike's family, we only have one other item in which we have scheduled for the program tonight, and that's going to be a kind of sing-along, kind of close out the evening. Do want to remind you that if you have your parking vouchers, to use them so that you don't have to pay a lot of money at the parking structure. And if we can ask Luther Batman Keith to come out, and Luther told me, look, he's not going to carry this tune by himself. The song is listed in the booklet. He has every expectation that everyone in the room is going to use their outside voice and sing along in connection with this.
All right.
Let's give Gregory a hand for putting this fantastic program together and all the folks really, you know, and I think this event has soul. You know, in the 70s, the late 60s, they used that word soul. It meant something. And I think this event has soul, and I think Mike would be beaming about this. So if you can help me, these are not the type of song I sing. I told him I don't know the song, but I've heard it, and I'm sure all of you had. So I'm not even sure what key I'll be singing it in, but you do your thing, I'll do mine. Help me, okay? Goes, I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue and clouds of white. The dark sacred day, the dark sacred night. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow so pretty in the sky are also on the faces of people going by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They're really saying, I love you. I hear babies cry. I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than I'll never know. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Yes, I think to myself,